You are listening to the podcast series of the Forum on Central and Eastern Europe of KU Leuven. In our 20-minute conversations, we discuss the latest academic research on the region. I'm Albena Shkodrova, a historian and a postdoctoral researcher at KU Leuven, also the coordinator of the forum. And today I'm delighted to welcome here Professor Ketevan Gurchiani from Ilia University in Tbilisi, Georgia. Good morning, Professor Gurchiani, and welcome to our studio in Leuven. You are a professor of anthropology in Tbilisi.
Yes, I'm professor of anthropology in Tbilisi. We have Ilia University, and I'm also head of the research center for cultural and social anthropology.
I also saw from your record that your research is practically very firmly connected with the life of your city.
Yes.
You have explored religiosity, the revival of religion in everyday life, and the interactions between people, their lived spaces, right?
Yes.
And also the urban environment. One of your recent projects is focused on Tbilisi as an urban assemblage. I will certainly ask you about this some more. But before that, just to add, that you've received numerous research grants and awards from Georgian, German, and US foundations. And you have been a visiting scholar at the Columbia University and the New York University. I would like to refer to your international experience and ask you my first question, which is, what is it to be a researcher in contemporary Georgia, and especially one who is focused on societies?
Wonderful question. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is something that is very important for me to understand the society in which I live. It is usually not something that anthropologists did previously. They would go somewhere else and then explore something and compare with them or position themselves as researchers with certain positionalities, so as female, etc., etc. In my case, it was coming back from my different stays, either in Germany or from the United States, and looking at myself and at my city from this perspective of a kind of familiar stranger that knows the surroundings but explores it from a different perspective. Then it also became my own, I quickly came back to my own position as a Georgian, and how the city, how the religiosity, how we behave towards nature, how it impacts our everyday lives. So this is something very important, and also in a certain sense political, because you pay attention to certain things, and then these things become kind of evident, or they become point of discussion for larger society, hopefully.
Is it not more difficult to identify topics as original when you are a local?
Yeah, some people say so, and there is a truth to it, certainly, because you need this kind of estrangement to look at certain things, but on the other hand, you have this familiarity that others do not have. You just have to acknowledge that as a scholar from Georgia, from Tbilisi, looking at Tbilisi, you look at certain things from a certain perspective. But who does not? If I would explore now Leuven, on my way here, I looked at every tree and how certain streets do not have trees, and how there are gardens and non-gardens. So streets are non-gardens, right? There is this kind of separation between green and built environment. So I would, there are certainly many different things that you see in Leuven, but my love to urban nature puts me in the position to always talk about it, or to always explore this out of a variety of things that could be explored, right? So this is my positionality shaping my research case everywhere.
I noticed that religion is a theme that is recurrent in your research. You return to it again and again. You've studied its role in public schools.
Yes.
The strategies of priests to negotiate with members of the church as well, and also even how religion has influenced Tbilisi's waterscape.
Yes.
In one of your publications, you posed a very intriguing question. How Soviet is religiousness in Georgia? Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, you did a wonderful job. This is a dream of an academic that somebody reads their papers. So in this paper that I wrote some years ago, I explored how this habitus, something that is very habitual in us, the ethos of camouflage, still continues in the practice of religiosity. It was the theory of Michel de Certeau. He was saying that those in power always impose certain rules and regulations, and those who have to obey to these rules and regulations, they try to use tactics to avoid those regulations, not to resist them, but to turn them into something that is doable for them and to make this space livable. So in Soviet times, Georgians were the experts in camouflaging. So nobody would really believe in communism. They would be proudly camouflaging. They would always say, "No, I don't really do it, but I do it as if." So this as if continues as part of the habitus, and whenever there are rules or regulations imposed by the very powerful Orthodox Church, people try to do as if. And in that, they have this knowledge how to use tactics in everyday negotiations, how to use this kind of blood that is explored at the social connections to achieve approval of certain things that should not be done or should be done otherwise, etc. Yeah? So this is what I explored in this paper on Soviet habitus continuing in the ethos of religiosity today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe we should add that blood is a very typical Soviet term.
Yes.
Which summarizes the practice of informal networks which exchange practically goods, services, status.
Yes, yeah.
Right, so it was very typical for
all the communist societies, right?
Yeah. Across,
and this is now priests could tell you, or people can tell you, if I have connections to this priest, then he will allow me certain things, and how it works and how it is a continuation, not something new. That was the topic of my paper that I published in Europe-Asia Studies some time ago. Yeah.
And how does religion connect to rivers?
Yeah.
You've studied the domestication and undomestication of nature around the river Vere.
Yeah.
Is I pronounced it correctly? Vere in Tbilisi.
Yeah.
And you describe it as entangled within ideas, beliefs, and materialities. Could you elaborate on that?
So that was part of my urban assemblage project, and one of the main ideas in the urban assemblage is that everything is caught up in different networks and entanglements. If I study infrastructure, then I look at it as something that has this entanglement of different beliefs, ideas, etc., but also nature, and more so the nature. So I looked at this modernist project to turn nature of this city into this kind of infrastructure that serves this city. It should be domesticated, in many cases turned into pipes underneath the earth to build something there. But still in these networks and this complex entanglement, then the ideas or beliefs erupt. And when in 2015, after a large developmental project in Georgia, the Vere was covered, and in 2015 it erupted and caused a lot of damage and people died. And then people remembered maybe it was wrong to put this river into pipes. There was environmental argument, but there was also a theological argument. The church said maybe the Vere also erupted because the zoo that was built there was built with the melted bells from church that were melted down in the 30s, etc. So theoretically, it was interesting for me to see how something that turns into materiality, like a church bell, for example, right? Or cemetery stones, they have been turned into their material features only, yeah? It can become a stone. But then, this stone is actualized, right? But then, at certain point of crisis, the symbolic features of it erupt in them. It is not just a stone, it is a gravestone. It is not just iron, it is a melted bell. So the main point is for me to see how materiality has a porosity. It absorbs ideas, etc., and they can erupt. And this there are different agents or actants who hold the power, and then they interpret it in their different ways. Besides this river, I wrote just recently about graveyards, how the ideas about the afterlife shaped this city. Because cemeteries, with their importance in Orthodoxy, have a prominent place in the city that is undergoing a huge gentrification and huge investor urbanism. But they are the most resilient places because of their entanglement with religious beliefs.
Right.
Yeah. So we had numbers in Georgia that said that people go to church not frequently, so the percentage was not high. But compared to the religiosity in everyday life, if you ask them how important is religion in your everyday life, then the number was very high, so up to 90%. So my idea was to look what was important, what is that they really do, and how what they call their religiosity. Right. And these were different projects that I did my research on. And then I also looked how the idea about the orthodoxy is also sometimes imposed on nature. So nature acts in connection with the church or with different groups, etc. It is not just a river, but an orthodox river, kind of, right? Yes. Or trees. Right.
Right.
Yeah,
so when you speak of Tbilisi as an urban assemblage, which aspects do you include in a research like that?
Yeah, I just finished this project. It was a great project, also a collaborative project with architects and urbanists and my fellow anthropologists. One of the main practices that we explored were how green spaces are created on different levels. For example, on the state level, how the state sees what are the green belts, etc. But also resistance practices by people who then take hold of different regulations and try to create their spaces, public spaces, or maintain their place by creatively employing different regulations. I published a paper in German which is called Hidden Power of Trees, Urban Resistance in Tbilisi, in which I explored how people plant certain trees to claim spaces. Another topic very important done by my architect friend and colleague Ilia University was creating a map that is an interactive map and compares how the cityscape changed from the 80s to 2020. And you can look how high-rise buildings were built, etc. It's a very good visual tool. And my colleague and friend Tamta Halvashi, she explored how infrastructure turns into something recyclable, and also leads to some artistic practices. And we had our dear colleague Paul Manning from Canada, who researched with us gardens, parks, and green spaces. So these are different things that we
quite
did.
Different aspects, yes.
Yes,
so it's a bit of a holistic kind of approach, right? I meant to ask you, could you give us some insights into how the domestication and undomestication in Tbilisi, of nature in Tbilisi, evolved throughout the 20th century? What was the role of the communist period in it?
Yes. Thank you for this question. I will try to sum it up shortly. The domestication of nature was very much part of the modernist projects and the Soviet modernist project. It was not to leave just wild nature in the city, or not to leave the nature that is not producing something. It should have a function, not being just there. And we see in the early documents and in early newspaper reports how proud they were to domesticate the lazy nature or the wild nature, etc., describing in those terms. But then the process of undomestication is also a process that happens because the nature cannot be confined to the limits or borders and boundaries they were set in, but also because the nature takes over as ruderal nature, as the ruderal plants, etc. They emerge on former industrial sites. They emerge out of the buildings that are just left abandoned there, and they emerge in the imagination also as places that were somewhere there. And in this, photography also plays a huge role as something that still acts.
Mm-hmm. And you were mentioning earlier that you also study how people, so the bottom-up perspective, so how people use the spaces. So how did people abstract the intentions of the planners? Because I think every scholar who has been preoccupied with urban planning, history of urban planning, knows that planning ideologies hardly ever achieve what they meant, because they are being amended by their users, but also in the case of the communist state, very much by the limitations of the state itself, because it was very often a very ambitious plan that encountered very quickly economic realities.
Yes. So in case of if urban planning, but also in the villages, what I saw was that there were rules and regulations for protection of certain nature and certain species, and there were also efforts to green the city. But these efforts were almost always losing to the efforts to give people more apartments. So it was always building on the cost of greening. So what people tried to do, they were trying to establish a little, to find the land plots in front of their corpus kind of block housings. Without asking permissions, they would plant a tree. And it would depend what kind of species you would plant. Then it would have would have more power or not. And the trees became legible or readable because the state distinguished between different species as worth of protecting. So those protected trees would be planted in spaces to protect this space. And this is now actually used widely to protecting spaces. Of course, now when the big money comes, they started uprooting trees that have this power, And we have an oligarch, Ivanishvili, who would uproot these old trees and take them to build a dendrological garden, etc. And then all these practices surrounding these streets, the idea that something is static and very firmly there has been also uprooted and causes a lot of dismay in the population. It's very interesting for a scholar to explore, but quite tragic for somebody who lives there to witness.
Yes, indeed. It is an emotional connection, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
I'm very sad to say that our time is almost over, so I would like to maybe conclude with one last question.
Yes.
How do you see Tbilisi 1 or 2 generations from now? Where is the city going?
Yeah, I hope very much that this city will turn back to also its nature and its understanding what kind of city people want. There is this clash between just city, green city, and it should be a city for people and not for just beton blocks somewhere whom we don't even know if anybody lives there, quite empty sometimes, very gentrified. So if desirable, would be for me a greener city, but also a just city. Yeah.
I wish you your hope comes true.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Albena, for hosting me. Yeah.